You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And it's now time to talk about the most interesting offseason in Steelers history, 20 unrestricted free agents and a lot of money decisions to come. Welcome to the Renegade Blitz. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward. Glad to have you on with us. And now it's time for our first ever interview with our subject from across the pond. Please welcome Simon Chester, analyst from Pro Football Focus. Thanks for taking a little bit of your time.
No problem, guys. Always happy to talk about the Steelers salary cap, particularly this year when it's going to be an absolute disaster.
Absolutely. As we mentioned, 20 free agents, and plus there's a couple RFAs and a bunch of other things like that. But that's the big selling point right now for this podcast. And according to overthecap.com, the Steelers are projected to be nearly $34 million over the cap. And they currently have, well, it says 19 players here that are set to become unrestricted free agents in March. What is your assessment of the Steelers' dire cap situation, and how do you think they'll be able to fix things?
Well, that figure's pretty much bang on. Over the cap's as good as it gets these days for cap news. The only thing they haven't included on there is they've still got the dodgy tight end on the roster. Obviously, having retired in the last few days, we don't have to worry so much about him. But that's another $5 million that will come off that figure. So that'll put it down to about $29 million once you've taken him into account. But it's not good. There's no question. There's no getting away from it. We need a couple more players retiring, at least a few players cutting, and a lot of restructures to even sniff getting to break even. And then, as you say, you've got, 19 free agents, I think 4 or 5 restricted free agents, and a handful of exclusive rights free agents to give you, I think, what would be the 28 on the year that are out of contract. So not good.
What does the retirement of Vance McDonald do for the Steelers cap situation? Because I assume that $34 million is with McDonald's retirement not being official yet.
Yeah, so you can take another $5.2 million off that. So that would bring you down to what, 29 million over. Yeah, there's some dead money with Vance McDonald's contract. I think it's about 2.7. But it's not too bad in the bigger scheme. I mean, he was going to get cut anyway, so, I mean, let's be honest. He kind of jumped before his push, but best of luck to him. He had a nice moment. One nice moment in a Steelers uniform. But I'm not sure it's worth quite the amount of money he got paid, but hey.
And with Haskins, that's a futures contract, so would he get like
Yeah, I mean, unless sometimes on a futures contract, you can get more. If he was particularly in demand, they could have given him some sort of boost on the minimum. Assuming he's coming at the minimum, I think that's somewhere around 780. I think this year, given his years of experience, a couple of years, isn't it? This will be a third year.
Yeah, third year.
I think he'd be due about the 780 mark. Could be wrong on that. If I'm wrong, it's either 660, 780, or 850. So it's in that ballpark. But there's nothing to stop them paying him more if they want to on a futures contract. They just generally don't. And given his recent history, it would be a surprise if they had to really juice the contract much. Maybe in incentives and something like that. Quite unlikely to be earned incentives, I would assume, in his case, because if you put anything in there for passing percentage of snaps or anything like that, he's very unlikely to make it, I guess. But Haskins a flyer, clearly. Contractually doesn't mean much to the salary cap. What it means to the team chemistry is a different story, obviously.
Roethlisberger, he's the big talk right now with a hefty, $41.5 million cap hit this year. The Steelers would save $19 million if they cut Roethlisberger, or if he would decide to retire before the third day of the new league year, when he's owed $15 million roster bonus.
Mm-hmm.
They would have $22.25 million in dead money with Roethlisberger off the books. What should the Steelers do with Roethlisberger, and how would a contract extension work out to lower his cap hit?
Yeah, I mean, logically, you do what they did a little bit with Troy and Heath towards the end of their deals. They were given extensions that we all knew when they signed them they weren't going to see the length of the deal out. I think they both got another 2 years added on to the final year. Neither Troy nor Heath made particularly big money off those deals. I mean, if you looked at the contracts, and imagine that being a deal they'd signed when they still had years left on the deal, there's no way they would have signed those contracts. So they were clearly under market value. But it wasn't about that. It was just about spreading out the length of the deal so you could pro-rata some of that bonus money down the road. So in Roethlisberger's case, you take the 19 million, you'd have to leave back probably around 2, whatever the figure is these days, as the veteran minimum to keep for this year. That would leave you with 17. Now, as many years as you add to the deal is how many you can divide that remaining 17, 18 million by. So if you add 3 years to the deal, you could take 12 million from this year and push it down the road for 2 more years. You'll obviously put dead money on when he's retired. And to do all that, Ben might want a little bit more cash. Ben is one of the highest earning players in NFL history. And he's not that way because he's not a smart man and knows how to make a little bit of money. So you could certainly pull that 90 million down by at least 10 million, maybe a little bit more. It just depends how they want to do it, if he's willing to do it. And God forbid, because I would be on the side of Ben should retire as soon as humanly possible. There's always a slight scary thought in my mind. You could construct a deal that makes him think, well, maybe I'll come back in 2022. I've got a contract. I've got 20 odd million coming my way. If they structure the deal in such a way that it makes it think he could play, I don't know if you don't create problems for yourself down the road when Ben maybe has a change of heart or something like that. But logically, they have to do something. I mean, there's too much money needing to be found this year. But as a side note, what I think is a possibility that will happen, nobody's mentioned it in the media yet, so that suggests it hasn't leaked out of NFL circles, and maybe they're not talking about it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of deal where you could take a slice of the cap from future years and move it forward. We had that when the cap was redone in 2010, 2011. You could borrow 3 or 4 mil from future years of the cap, bring it forward to say this year to help offset some of the deficits, because you've got certain teams looking at massive debts or massive cuts this year to get under the Saints. I think about 100 million over, which is absolutely ridiculous. And if you look at the 4 or 5 teams, I think that are closest to, oh God, more than that. I'm looking at now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 13, 14 teams already in the red. Saints, Eagles, Rams, Packers, Chiefs, Texans, Vikings, Bears, Titans, Giants. Now, all right, there's some crack in there, but there's also some very good teams in there. And it might be in the NFL's interest to create a way of helping these teams borrow against future years of the cap to make it work for all of them, to be honest, because otherwise you're going to decimate some of the big teams in the league, and I can't believe that's conducive to a positive league.
Wow. So is this primarily a COVID situation where I assume that the cap was supposed to go up? If I go back and look at it, I'm pretty sure it was supposed to jump like a 3 or 4 or 5 million, something like that.
Yeah, we would have been, in a normal year, you'd been projected to come in anywhere around 195, 198 million, which if it'd been, let's say it'd been a bonus year with big sales, big attendances, you could even squeeze that to 2. So yes, this is very much league revenue is down because gates are not there. I'm sure they've lost sponsorship deals all over the place for in-stadium deals and stuff like that with food and beverage people and things of that nature. So yeah, this is very much COVID's cost us X. That is the agreement the players and the owners had about how the revenue was calculated and therefore projected through the years. Projections taken a massive hit this year. So yeah, the NFL wants their money back. But they say that now, but as I say, with the third of the league looking like they're in the red, maybe when you get some owners meetings together, maybe we thrash out a deal to sort something out. Because if you don't need to borrow the money, fine, don't borrow the money. The teams that do need to borrow the money do. So it still would be an advantage for the Jaguars of the league, because they wouldn't have to borrow against future years of the cap. But some owners will be reluctant to that, because that basically means borrowing money from the future to pay players now. And at the end of the day, it's players getting the money. And some owners don't like that.
You mentioned one that was possibly a cap casualty in Vance McDonald. He's retiring, but there's also the future of Marquise Pouncey, Joe Hayden, Vince Williams, and Derek Watt that could be potential cap casualties. Do you see any of those names coming through this offseason?
I think it seems quite likely. I had a quick glance at some of the cap figures before chatting with you today, and I noticed that Spotrak's already got Marquise Pouncey retiring, and they've accounted for his retirement in their cap figures. So I thought that was a little bit brutal. He seems like a logical one to go. If I put my PFF hat on for a minute, I got to agree, he's not a good center. I know a lot of fans would argue with the grading that he gets, but trust me, I see a lot of his tape. He's not good.
He was especially brutal in that wild card game against the Browns.
Yeah, he's not even just not average anymore. He's not good. If by every metric that you judge your tight ends and you compare him to others, even if you still think he's good, in that case, the rest of the league's gone way past him in ability. If that's what we're saying. But for $8 million, I think he gets. Is that what his salary is these days?
$8 million plus a Pro Bowl nomination, which I think that was basically off of name only.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
He hasn't genuinely earned a Pro Bowl nomination in about 5 seasons, if we're being honest. I love it. I'm sure he's a lovely man to hang out with, but whether I'm paying him $8 million cash this year, I don't know. And you can certainly find a center for a hell of a lot less than $8 million that can do a half decent job. I'm still a little bit sad we let who was the center from a year or so ago, the backup who used to come in and play well.
He got brought in with Munchak. I do remember, and I think he was a Titan at a certain point. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, but we had a guy that was a rotational backup center. The name escapes me right now, but from a couple of years ago, we let him go. We don't seem to have a backup center. If was it Hassan Sowers, the backup? I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
But there is somebody you can find out there for less than $8 million. Certainly in the first year, because while people say, "Oh, you're going to cut this player, you're going to cost you $8 million. How are you going to find a good center to replace him?" Let's not forget that when you sign people to a long-term contract, their first year of their deal is particularly low. It will, in the Steelers' way, it will be $1-2 million base with the signing bonus spread over 4 or 5 years. So the year one cap hit is low. So even if you take a name like Joe Hayden and you cut him, and you say, well, where am I going to find a great cornerback who's going to come in and play for $7 million? In year one, you might get close to getting that figure. There are ways of doing that. Maybe it doesn't get you a top flight number one cornerback, but then I would argue, is Joe Hayden a number one cornerback anymore? Possibly not. If you like someone like, say, Cam Sutton, and you thought he had potential to be a starting cornerback, you could certainly sign Cam Sutton, I would hope, for less than $7 million in year one money. His contract would be bigger, but the actual year one cap hit might well come in around the $7 million mark, even if he's a $12, $15 million a year player. Although I don't think it's worth that much, obviously.
Is there any way the Steelers can re-sign JuJu Smith-Schuster or even, Bud Dupree? Smith-Schuster is probably looking at least $16 million per year, and Dupree will probably earn about the same, if not more, per year in his next contract. Where do you see things on that end? Because the JuJu topic on Twitter is a big one on the fact whether he stays or goes.
I think it may be the cantankerous part of me. I love JuJu. I love the fact that he winds people up by just enjoying himself, which is utterly insane when you think about it. Man's having a good time, and that angers people. How insane is that? No, JuJu's gone. I mean, even if Steelers fans weren't trolling his parents' house in California right now and annoying him in the way that the fans seem to have gone after him this year, and he, the money was there to make him want to stay. The money's not there. It's just not. You cannot compete with the top teams that are going to throw big money at him. And I know he's not necessarily the number one receiver on the free agency list this year, but he's top 3 or 5 easily. He's getting good money, and with the package of stuff that comes with JuJu for the right fan base, I can imagine they're going to love it. San Francisco, Rams. I hate to say it, best place he should go for. If you get the money, it's the Ravens. Desperate for a receiver. How much would he like to come back and stick it to the Steelers twice a year, just for the added juice on that side? And I personally would love to see Ravens fans have to eat crow about all the crap they've said about him for the last 4 years. Now he's theirs. But no, JuJu's gone, which is a shame. Real shame. Bud Dupree's gone. Alejandro Villanueva, they might find a way of getting him back under contract. One that concerns me, Mike Hilton. I think he can make good money somewhere. Certainly better money than the Steelers can afford to pay him. And then you've got Cam Sutton. I think you have to keep one or the other of those two, because that's like a lot of effort's been put into developing Cam Sutton, and I still don't think he's to where he could be. But I don't know. I don't know what you pay him to keep him. James Conner, genuinely love the kid. Can't see how you keep him. Not unless he takes a way under market value deal. And then what are you offering him a way under market value deal for? Hasn't stayed healthy. So yeah, going down the list of players, maybe you get to keep Matt Filer. Maybe you get to keep Tyson Alualu. Maybe you get to keep Zach Banner. Maybe Alejandro Villanueva. Outside of some really creative accountancy, that I can see ways you could do it, but it would take a lot of effort.
And with JuJu, I know some people have put out like New York Jets because they have like a lot of cap space, and I think Jerry Dulac reported that JuJu wants to play in a bigger market to build his brand, but he kind of he downed that report on Pat McAfee brought it up. So it should be interesting to see where JuJu lands. But I agree with you. I think he's going to get paid, more than what the Steelers could really get, offer him. But it'll be interesting to see. Maybe he goes back to one of the California teams or not. But it should be interesting to see where JuJu lands.
Yeah, he's definitely a talented player who I don't think's as respected now maybe as he should be. I mean, is he a number one? I don't know. But I think you give him a solid number two in a decent system. I think he could be. But then again, some of the teams that might want him, Rams don't have the cash. Seahawks could do the receiver. Ravens have got might have cap money. That's
Patriots too, I think, or a team that has.
Yeah, sorry, we don't talk about the Patriots. I'm a guest. Surely we can't swear at me.
There's a lot of places that JuJu could go. It's like, I think of teams that need wide receivers. I mentioned this on a Browns podcast. I think the Eagles, whenever they figure out if they want Carson Wentz or something like that, is another place that he could go to. There's the franchise tag that's always still in play for the Steelers. And by proxy, you have to say Bud Dupree, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. And of course, there's Hilton potentially with the tag, and then if they really feel like it and Ben really wants them back, it's JuJu. So is there anyone that can get the tag for the Steelers this year, or it's just not happening?
It's just not happening because the tag values are going to be so high this year. It's going, and it's again, once you put the tag, you have to incorporate it into your cap straight away. So if you put the tag on JuJu, I don't know what it is, let's say it comes in about 18 million, you have to instantly be able to clear 18 million in cap space. You can't put the tag on him and then we'll wait in a month, we'll have got everything sorted out. It has to fit. I mean, obviously there's calculations to be done, but there's just no chance. I think if you want to make money and you want to make money quickly, Pouncey retires. Obviously Vance McDonald, terrible tight end's already gone, done us a favor. Eric Ebron, we haven't really dug into Eric Ebron, but why is he here? He's going to collect $6 million next year to what? Drop important catches? What's the point? So Ebron's gone. The dodgy one's Derek Watt, because I think if you cut Derek, I don't know if TJ's sitting over there going like, what? Why did you cut my brother? You signed him last year and you're cutting him already. And it only saves you 2.75, but it does save you 2.75, and we need everything we can get right now. This one hurts Vince Williams. Robert Spillane played pretty well this year, and if Bush is back and you put the two of them side by side, all right, I'll ask you, is Robert Spillane any worse?
He was a better run defender, I thought. They didn't give him they kind of put him in a bad situation there against the Browns, lining him up against Jarvis Landry. But, I'm a big Vince Williams fan, but I kind of agree. He is getting, a little older. I mean, I would hate to see him go, but if you got to save some cap space, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be that big of a drop off with Spillane in there, along with Devin Bush.
Yeah. So right. So the Vince Williams cut, that's $4 million. So with those 5 players that we just got, that's 8, 14, 18, 20. That's $25 million you just saved right there. Well, that's got you a long way to where you want to be. And then you extend Roethlisberger's contract, that gets you about another 10. You get Tuitt to restructure, that can get you about another 4. You get Hayden, who's in the last year of his deal. If we're not cutting it, maybe we give him an extension. We at least lower the cap hit in year 1, shove the bonus down the road. Same with Nelson. So there is ways of creating 40 to 50 million. But once you've created the 40 to 50 million, how much you're only left with about 10, 15 to spend. Yeah. So that's not all going on one player at all.
Wow. That just shows how tough was it. Yeah, and that's losing some long-time players. Pouncey, like we mentioned, he's been declining, but Vince Williams will be a tough one too. But they got to do some stuff, with the tough cap situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's little restructures you can do. Jordan Berry, there's enough time left on his contract. You can squeeze $1 million or so there. You can get $1 million or so here or there from people's contracts with restructured $2 million, $3 million, $4 million on the bigger name players. You're not getting it, but you're not bringing in anybody of note. You're just not.
To steal football from across the pond, saying that I think that if you put Devin Bush as basically effectively a sweeper and then just tell Spillane to go in there and just go attack everyone through the line as a run defender, I think he could pull that off.
Yeah. If Bush, I'm not saying he's got a health problem. He had an injury last year. So but assuming Bush has a full season and he's improving, I don't see why you couldn't look at the Bush-Spillane combination playing full 16 games is better than anything we had last season. And in that sense, it's an upgrade. I know we're looking for silver linings here in very, very dark clouds, but I think that's how it's going to have to be, unfortunately. Steeler fans, we've all been too used to just winning and being a decent team. Everyone knew that the cost was going to come due at some point. I mean, we all knew that. And then the bill is coming due eventually, and there's no real magic wands to be waved anymore to keep this team intact the way it is and to continue forward, which is, to be fair, what they've done relatively consistently for the last 10, 15 years. We haven't sat here and watched big names go out the door, and we certainly haven't watched bloodlettings at the end of the season where we had to cut 3 or 4 names just to keep the squad together. But that 41 million in cap money for Ben is looming large, and now they're going to pay.
And you touched on the players that could possibly restructure their contracts, but I don't know how much they could spend on free agents. But do you see any players out there that the Steelers could potentially offer? I don't know what they really can do with their tough cap situation, but maybe a cheap deal here and there.
You're looking for more of the Steve Nelson type deals, relatively, $5 million a year, 25 million. I mean, inflation, I suppose, does exist these days, so maybe that's pushed to a 6-7 million a year. I think once it's all been massaged and hopefully some of the cap relief I've mentioned possibly comes from the other, I think you could still see a couple of signings. Who they are and what sort of level we're at, I really don't know. I think they're going to have to look at the running back market, and given how that's been devalued, that might be somewhere where you can get a little bit of talent without too much money. I think the Steelers need to look for value, not that they don't already, but you're not going to find value in the edge rushing market. You're not going to find value in the quarterback market, although not they'll obviously won't really be looking at. But there's certain positions you're not going to get value and get a good player out of it. But there are other positions where maybe you could get a decent running back and end up paying him $3-4 million a year. I can't think of any names off the top of my head who stand out, but there always is. And what the free agents say now, I think it could be radically different in a month or so's time, because we're already seeing quarterbacks getting agreements. Stafford's, it's relatively unprecedented. Stafford's about to be available. It seems to be pretty strong that Watson's going to be available. So, what happens when the Saints start to think, who are 100 million over the cap, who they're getting rid of? The Eagles are 53 million over the cap. Falcons are going to have to get rid of some people. They're 42 million. They've got a lot of talented receivers. So however you look at the free agent market right now, I think in a month or so's time, it's going to look dramatically different. And then maybe there is value. And then maybe even players you didn't think the Steelers could get back, you've got a better shot at, because there's now 12 players in that position rather than 3 good players in that position coming out, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think they if they could maybe get a blocking tight end in free agents. I think they need to draft one too. That, like you mentioned, Ebron, they might keep him. I'm not sure, but I wasn't really too impressed with, like you mentioned, drop passes and everything. They need to get like a Heath Miller type of tight end. They haven't replaced him properly since he retired. But
let me ask you a question real quick. If you're mentioning the receivers and all that stuff, the Steelers have a bunch of wide receivers, and one thing is James Washington. Now, I know that this is coming straight out of not even left field. It's coming out of the river near PNC Park, really. Is there a potential that a receiver may be moved? If they somehow keep JuJu, will they have to move a James Washington?
I would say not, given how tight they are on the cap, and the one thing the Steelers do have going for them, even if JuJu does leave, I think they could easily convince themselves we're good enough to come back next year with what we've got and not replenish it beyond a draft pick. So everyone bumps up one. Claypool and Johnson become your starters, with Washington as your third, and then Ray McLeod comes in. Maybe he becomes your slot receiver, fourth receiver, however you pan it out, and your draft pick comes through. So with what James Washington's set to earn next season, which is $1,093,000, no, you can't afford to let a player who's earning that little amount of money leave when you're in a cap hell that you've got. There's nothing of value. It's a shame football doesn't have what soccer has over here, where we can sell players and you could make the money back that way. If you could sell a James Washington, he'd be worth a lot of money, but life doesn't work that way.
I want a transfer market like tomorrow. The Steelers would be like Man U.
Yeah. If you had a transfer market, then yes, the Steelers would have ways of creating capital, because they do have some very good, young, talented players. There's lots of. I was reading around a little bit, see what other people had suggested on getting into the cap. I saw one Steelers website that will remain nameless suggest that they cut TJ Watt, because that will save them $10.4 million. So you want to see? Don't believe always what you read on the internet. Some people have some really bad ideas.
Yeah, I agree there. But let's talk about the Steelers' approach towards contracts. I mean, of course, we mentioned a little bit, they tend to backload their contracts, and that's probably at least one of the reasons why they're in this cap hell. It works out genuinely for them guys, and you have to give credit to guys like Omar Khan, Brandon Hunt, and even Kevin Colbert for this entire thing. But as we're looking at this thing with Roethlisberger, do you believe that the Steelers might have to change up the way they think about contracts, especially with COVID running rampant for who knows how long?
I think that the interesting one will be TJ Watt, because I don't think the Steelers have really had a benchmark contract to have to give out since the Bell Brown Roethlisberger deals. The last time they gave a massive deal to a defensive player was, I guess, Polamalu. I can't think of it. But Hayward had a very big deal, but he wasn't the highest paid at his position. But Watt's going to not only be the highest paid at his position, I would imagine he might be the highest paid defensive player in the NFL. I mean, he certainly got a good claim for that. That deal, I cannot believe, is going to look the way that all Steelers deals have done, which is exactly as you said, 5-6 year deal, big signing bonus, prorate the length of it, very few guarantees. I think Ben's the only one with any real guarantees, and those are guarantees against injury. It's going to have to change, and maybe to attract some free agents, maybe to get a guy to agree to come to Pittsburgh and take a little bit less than you would ordinarily pay him, you're going to have to guarantee it. Maybe that's why Kevin hasn't signed a new deal and is possibly retiring or going somewhere else, if you believe the rumors.
And do you think that Watt deal will come this offseason, or you think it'll be next offseason?
Was it Tayzone? He's down for about 10.5 this year. If you can sign him to a new deal this offseason that will reduce his cap hit, then do it. 10.5's a lot. There's certainly a way you can get down that his year one money is less than 10.5. Let's see. I mean, if he gets voted Defensive Player of the Year, Bill just went up quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's just wins Defensive Player of the Year, do you want to quickly, a month later, sign into an extension? I'm not saying you want him to have a bad year next year, but financially speaking, it wouldn't hurt if he didn't have another defensive MVP season next year. But that's the wrong thing to say when you money and winning sometimes don't always mesh.
And then the same thing's coming up for Minka Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. They're doing their 5th-year options in May. Fitzpatrick's a lock to get that, but do you think Edmonds will receive the 5th-year option as well?
I'd hope not, because it's not going to be. I mean, we're talking a sizable chunk of change for a player that I would hope they see isn't all that they would have hoped for from first-round draft pick. But Steelers are ridiculously loyal to their players, particularly players that they've drafted. And it's very common for them to give extensions to players you think weren't going to get one, to do that 5th-year option. I'm trying to think of players they haven't given the 5th-year option to. There are a few.
Jarvis Jones.
Jarvis Jones is an obvious one that comes to mind, yeah. But, I mean, there was an argument when Bud Dupree got his 5th-year option that what were they doing? I don't think there was anyone that saw. I think it was under the 5th-year option that he finally had a good year. So I don't know. I would like to think not, but Mike Tomlin is fiercely loyal, if nothing else.
And what would the number come out for Fitzpatrick and Edmonds for?
Off the top of my head, I don't actually know. To work out the rate of the 5th-year option, it's based on contracts from the year before. You take the top 5 in that position and you average them out. So the value of the 5th-year option can change and does change as, say, the 3rd highest paid safety in the league gets cut. Therefore, he no longer counts for the calculation anymore, and the next one moves up on this, and we take the top 5 from that. So whoever the top 5 is right now, take an average of that. But I'm going to guess, knowing what other people have got, you're probably looking 14, 15. That's a lot.
That's for both too.
I don't have a problem giving.
No problem.
Pretty much, I'll give him a checkbook. He can fill in the rest. Terrell Edmonds, no mate. You don't even get to look at my checkbook.
That 5th-year option, he's going to come out and pull off a Dupree, which is basically just ruin everything in 2 years' time. And then suddenly you're looking up at, we got to franchise one of either Fitzpatrick or Edmonds potentially to keep a guy and figure out a contract situation.
It would be a beautiful thing to think that you've got your 2 safeties of the future locked in with the 2 of them. I think that's a bit optimistic, but I think Fitzpatrick is that guy. So if I were the Steelers, I'd roll with him. I'd put all my money in his basket and I'd let Edmonds walk and I'd just go back to the draft and I'd find another one. The business of football is harsh. None of the comments I've made about wanting people to go means I don't want them. I'm just looking purely at this from a numbers perspective. I'd love them all to stay, but life's not like that.
Same thing with Roethlisberger. I mean, there's been numerous Pittsburgh reporters that always been really close with Ben or big supporters of him who've mentioned that they would like to see him retire instead of come back for his last year on his contract. And the Steelers forced Polamalu out, so I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it to Ben as well. But you mentioned that you would rather see Ben retire. And, you think he'll come back though this year?
Yeah, I don't. 20 million reasons, no, 19, 20 million reasons to come back. It's a lot of reasons to come back. I think maybe the way things ended the season, I could see him sitting there thinking, if not for that absurd first quarter, we win. Steelers win the game. I'm in the playoffs. I'm playing against Buffalo. Can't say I'd fancied his chances, particularly. But in his head, I can see how he convinces himself this was another shot at the Super Bowl, and I don't want to go out like this. Last one, my Super Bowl, 12 years ago now. I can see him wanting that Peyton Manning style. Last couple of years in my career, I win another Super Bowl. I get my Jerome Bettis moment even. But if he's logical about it, he looks at the rest of the team around him, I would assume he would think, I've got less of a chance winning with the Steelers 2021 version that's going to come back, because the talent's not going to be as good. I just don't see how it can be. And with a new offensive coordinator, I'm assuming it is going to be from inside and not Hugh Jackson. But maybe, was it the Chargers guy, Pep? Maybe he gets it. If a new offensive coordinator with a new system, That might push him out. I mean, at his age, he was never exactly the fastest at learning the playbook back in the day, and I don't think learning's necessarily been his forte. I can't imagine he wants to digest another system. So that might be the teller. I mean, they've already got rid of his boy, Randy. Are they sending him subtle signals here? Possibly. I mean, maybe that's the way you get rid of him, because as you say, I don't know that you can cut him. But I mean, let's not pretend. They have cut massive names over the years. They've let icons walk out the door.
Like Palomar, like that one was a
Kevin Green. Green, rest in peace, was one of those guys. But I think it's going to be like this when it comes to the Steelers. It's one thing to let a safety go, a quarterback in this league with the rules set like this, and especially like even with it, yeah, they were down 28 big, but would another quarterback have been able to even make you go, oh my God, they're going to pull it off?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When Ben's sitting there thinking, I lost the game, but I came back. I threw 500 yards. I mean, am I washed off? I ain't washed off. I just threw for 500 yards and almost won a game. I was down 28 points in. And if I'm him, I think I can still play.
It wasn't a Drew Brees situation where he had like a torn rotator cuff, a collapsed lungs, broken ribs. And even with that, it's like his arm really, when you think about it, it's like it hasn't been the same for like 5 years. And you can also go with the shoulder surgery, which while an elbow is kind of similar in a way, an elbow can eventually get back together. Shoulder, that's a little bit different.
But then at the same time, I go through that same thought process. Then I think of all those games that for the first half, it seemed like he wasn't playing. Like week after week after week, like what is he doing? First half, what's going on? What is going on? And then come alive in the fourth quarter. And I sometimes look at Ben, I don't think his skills have diminished dramatically. I wonder if his mental commitment, drive, desire, it almost seems like Ben needs to be down to get a kick up the butt to get going. He doesn't come out firing in games so much anymore. Ben brings you back.
17th game on the horizon too. That's one more game for him. And also, do you really want to see another like, oh, here comes the Steelers in the second half? It's like I can remember off the top of my head, and it was the Tennessee game in which they actually had a really good first half, and it made me think that, wow, this team's gonna possibly win it all from there. And then from there, it just slowly but surely went downhill.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. I don't know. I like to think he might choose to retire, but I'm absolutely confident right now that he's not going to, until something is said, or a little flippant Ben Roethlisberger in the media speaking to him, said to Ed Boucher on the side, "Screw this, I'm out." I don't know. We'll see. We'll see who becomes the OC. I guess I think that's going to be a big thing. Be nice to think Ben somehow agrees to like a 5-year extension with no extra cash, and then we'll bleed this out nicely. But I don't know. Yeah, there's certainly, you could see financially he could afford to do that, but whether he would or not, I wouldn't blame him for not. But whether he will, we'll see.
And that's Simon Chester, analyst from Pro Football Focus. Thanks for the talk about the entire cap situation and just how this offseason is going to be the worst.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I always like to give bad news wherever I travel.
It's better in an English accent. It's always better. It's always better. Right. Well, doom and gloom is fun, isn't it, Chris? Man, you really wish they were still in the playoffs right now to make it worthwhile, because it's going to be tough.
Just going over the cap, even saving that $5.2 million around that number with Vance McDonald's, it's still really bad. Their caps, around $29 million over the cap. And as Simon mentioned, a lot of teams are dealing with it. It's going to be tough around the league, and we'll have to see if they borrow from future years. But it's going to be a tough year for the Steelers. They're going to lose some key players, and might have to cut ways with some longtime veterans like Pouncey, and Vince Williams will be a tough one to see go.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be the first off season where it's just I know the Troy off season wasn't exactly the best, but man, this feels worse, especially with the situation going around. It's starting 11-0, and then just the entire bottom falling out. You knew that you knew that this was going to most likely be the last ride. I know Ben said Lombardies, but whenever you really sat back and looked and see like what's the situation going into the next offseason, it felt like this was really a Super Bowl or bust year for the Steelers, and clearly it is. But it's just like now when you see the reality of the entire situation eliminated in the wild card round, it's like, wow, this really was Super Bowl or bust.
Yeah, I mean, when they got out to that 11-0 start, you saw some issues with the team. That Cowboys game was really the first instance where I was like, man, I'm not too sure if this team's like for real. But for most of the season, everybody, Steelers fans thought it was going to be Chiefs Steelers in the AFC Championship game, and it didn't end up being that way, and it just faded towards the end. And Roethlisberger, he looked. He had spurts where he did well, but he looked really old towards the end, I thought. You didn't see that mobility that he once had. It was kind of like Phillip Rivers. Like, there's older quarterbacks, and, Father Time is, pretty much undefeated. It gets to everyone. So Tom Brady, for some reason, he's playing the NFC Championship game, and he's still doing well somehow. But for most quarterbacks that age, obviously they're done at that point.
Well, it's because Tom Brady is football's answer to LeBron James. He spends $1 million on his body just to play and give people the business at like 43 going on 44. That's just wanting it a little bit more than everyone who really wants it with him. So yeah. That's just one thing we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about Brady as much on it. This is not a Bucs podcast, just so you know. But yeah, it's all about one. And if Ben wants to come back, the door's open. It's just the question is when he looks at this team and he sees what he's going to have for 2021, he's going to have to ask himself, was this what I signed up for whenever I went through with Lombardies? Because this is going to be tough next year. It's not going to be. You're probably not going to see the same dominant Steelers defense, though. Somehow, when it comes with there's a will, there's a way with this team. So it's going to be interesting to see what he wants to do there.
Yeah, I mean, Fichtner's gone. Pouncey might retire or might be cut. Villanueva might retire and might not be re-signed also. So like. Those three guys right there are close to Roethlisberger. The offensive line just getting older, and I don't know if Ben would want to. I think he will come back, but if you look at it, realistically, they're probably not going to be as good as they were this past year.
The question is, does he feel like can they overcome that? That's going to be the difference. If he believes that he can overcome this, because let's just face it. The Steelers just had a hot start to the season, a red hot start to the season. But when you take a look at the record, but objectively, when you look inside that, there was a lot of yellow flags out there. And again, this team's probably not going to start off 11-0 next year, unless there's like some sort of like magic lucky occurrence. It's going to be a very tough schedule. They finished first in their division, so that means that they're going to face the rest of the AFC that finished first in their division. So it's going to be the Chiefs. It's going to be the Bills again. And it's going to be the winner of the NFC South, the Titans. And while these teams are going to have a lot of answers going on in the offseason with that, just with focus, we're going to see more questions coming out of the Steelers, especially with potential coach movement and stuff like that. And because now even Ike Hilliard, the wide receivers coach, is getting offensive coordinator calls and stuff like that. Matt Canada was getting calls from Detroit and Miami. And we mentioned this during the last podcast. We thought it was official that he was going to be the offensive coordinator of the Steelers. That's still up in the air. He could still come back as the quarterback's coach, and the Steelers could hire a guy like Pep Hamilton, or even, as much as Simon probably didn't want him on the team, Hugh Jackson. And of course, there's also Schottenheimer and so many guys, and you could still see Getsy coming in for the Steel Valley contingent on this podcast, namely me. But there's so many questions to ask, and there's also other things we haven't asked: a new offensive line coach, a defensive backs coach. It's gonna be a very, very interesting and a very, very sad offseason for Steelers fans, but you never know what can happen out of this. They could come out of here with a glare of hope, a ray of sunshine in a way.
Maybe if they bring back Cam Sutton, I think that would be a big sign-in for them. Just because I don't think they could lose both Hilton and Sutton in the free agency.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they will choose. Slot corner is important, but Sutton kind of seems like he could be like an every down corner in a way. He could be a 4 downs corner, and he can play some slot, but with Hayden being gone, he may be asked to step up and be a primary corner, and that's very important in a league in which you have to face off against guys at wide receiver that are freaks, for lack of a better term.
And it's going to be hard to see them bringing back JuJu Smith-Schuster and Bud Dupree just because of the dire cap situation.
And of course, even though with Bud with a knee injury, he might want to have a more secure future. And of course, you got to go elsewhere if you want that, most likely. And with JuJu, I said it during the last podcast, he's better than what the numbers and what people believe in his antics can show. And if a team realizes that, they're going to outprice the Steelers. And it's going to be bad. But of course, there's a lot of teams that have to make decisions with the wide receiver market. It's probably going to be a little diluted. And that's going to be the Steelers' best hope in keeping JuJu. Unless he really decides to take a team-friendly deal to play with Ben one more season. But there's a lot of questions ahead for the Steelers. And that's all for us here on the Renegade Blitz. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.